There is a quiet truth most people never learn. Control is not about dominance. It's not about power over others, and it's definitely not about forcing the world to bend to your will. Real control is internal. It's what happens when life pushes you and you don't collapse, overreact, or lose yourself. Most people are constantly reacting to messages, to opinions, to pressure, to fear of being replaced, forgotten, or left behind. One bad comment ruins their mood. One setback shakes their confidence. One emotional moment costs them respect they spent years building. And slowly, without realizing it, they become predictable, replaceable, easy to manage, easy to overlook. But there is another type of person. You've felt their presence before. They don't rush. They don't explain themselves too much. They don't react just because they're triggered. When things get chaotic, they get calmer. When others panic, they think clearly. When pressure rises, they don't disappear. They stabilize the room. These people are not always the loudest. They are rarely the most dramatic. But they are always the hardest to replace. Not because they try to be special, but because they are controlled. They control their reactions. They control their emotions. They control their standards, even when no one is watching. And over time, that control turns into something rare. Trust, dependability, quiet authority. This audiobook is not about becoming cold or emotionless. It's about learning how to feel deeply without letting emotions run your life. It's about mastering yourself so thoroughly that external chaos loses its grip on you. Because here's the uncomfortable truth most people avoid. The world does not reward potential. It rewards stability. Talent without self-control burns out. Intelligence without discipline gets ignored. Passion without restraint becomes a liability. But when you combine skill with calm, when you pair competence with emotional control, you become someone others rely on, and reliance is the foundation of being irreplaceable. Over the next chapters, we will break down the art of control, not as a concept, but as a daily practice. You'll learn how to pause instead of react, how to stay grounded under pressure, how to silence the ego without shrinking yourself, how to build a version of you that remains steady when others fall apart. This is not motivation. This is not hype. This is training. Training to become the kind of person who doesn't need to compete for attention, the kind of person whose presence reduces chaos, the kind of person whose value doesn't fluctuate with moods, trends, or opinions. By the end of this journey, you won't be chasing significance. You'll be embodying it. And before we begin, take a moment. If you know someone in your life who feels overwhelmed, reactive, lost, or quietly struggling to regain control, someone who needs calm more than advice, discipline more than motivation, and inner strength more than noise, share this video with them. It might be exactly what they need to start improving their life. Chapter 1. Control starts where most people lose it, their reactions. Most people don't lose control in big, dramatic moments. They lose it in small, ordinary ones. A message arrives at the wrong time. A tone feels disrespectful. Someone questions their value, their effort, their place. And before they even realize it, they react. The voice tightens. The body tenses. The mind rushes to defend, explain, justify, or attack. That reaction feels natural. It feels human. But it's also where power quietly slips away. Because the moment you react without choice, you're no longer in control. Something outside of you is. Your mood is now owned by a comment. Your focus is now hijacked by a trigger. Your value is now shaped by circumstances instead of standards. This is where most people lose themselves, not in failure, but in reactivity. And they believe control means suppressing emotion. It doesn't. Control means creating space between what you feel and what you do next. That space is small, sometimes only a few seconds. But inside that pause lives your power. Think about it. Two people face the same pressure. One explodes, shuts down, or spirals internally. The other stays grounded, composed, deliberate. Same situation, completely different outcomes. The difference isn't intelligence. It isn't strength. It isn't even experience. It's reaction control. Most people don't choose their reactions. They justify them. I was tired. They pushed my buttons. That's just how I am. But every justification is a quiet surrender. Because when your reactions are automatic, your behavior becomes predictable. And predictable people are easy to replace, because they respond the same way every time. They crack under the same pressure. They make the same emotional mistakes. In contrast, the people who rise, who last, who become irreplaceable, are harder to read. Not because they hide, but because they choose. They feel the surge of emotion just like everyone else. The frustration, the urge to react, the pull to prove something, but they don't obey it. They pause. That pause is not weakness, it's discipline, and discipline is the foundation of control. When you pause, 3 things happen. First, you regain ownership of the moment. Instead of being dragged by emotion, you step back into the driver's seat. Second, you protect your reputation. People don't remember how you felt. They remember how you acted. Third, you preserve your energy. Reactive behavior drains you. Controlled behavior compounds you. Most damage in life doesn't come from bad intentions. It comes from emotional leakage. Saying something you can't take back. Responding too fast. Letting irritation leak into your tone. Letting stress bleed into your decisions. Over time, those small leaks erode trust, and trust, once cracked, is hard to rebuild. This is why reaction control matters more than talent. Talent impresses. Control reassures. Talent shines briefly. Control sustains. The people others rely on, the ones promoted, protected, kept close, are not the most emotional. They are the most regulated. They don't make situations heavier. They stabilize them, and stability is rare. So how do you begin reclaiming control where most people lose it? You start by noticing your triggers, not judging them, not suppressing them, just noticing. Pay attention to what instantly shifts your mood. Certain words, certain tones, certain types of people. These are not weaknesses. They are entry points. Every trigger is a signal showing you where your control still needs training. The goal is not to eliminate emotion. The goal is to delay reaction, even by a few seconds. When something hits you emotionally, do this. Pause your body before you answer. Relax your shoulders. Unclench your jaw. Slow your breath. Your nervous system leads your mind. If your body calms down, your thoughts follow. Then name the emotion silently. Anger, embarrassment, fear, ego. Naming it creates distance. Distance creates choice. Now ask yourself one question. What response protects my long-term value here? Not your pride, not your comfort, your value. Sometimes the answer is silence. Sometimes it's a calm statement. Sometimes it's walking away. Sometimes it's addressing the issue, but without heat. What matters is that you chose instead of reacting. This is how self-control is built. Not in grand moments, but in repeated micro-decisions. Each time you pause instead of react, you strengthen a muscle. Each time you choose composure, you raise your internal standard. Each time you stay grounded, you train people how to treat you. Because people respond differently to someone who doesn't react easily. They speak more carefully. They test you less. They trust you more. Not because you demand respect, but because you demonstrate control. And control is contagious. When you walk into a room calm, others adjust. When you speak without urgency, people listen. When you don't rush to defend yourself, your presence carries weight. This is how reaction control slowly turns into authority. Quiet authority, the kind that doesn't need validation, the kind that doesn't fluctuate with mood. the kind that makes you difficult to replace. Most people are ruled by their reactions. That's why they feel exhausted, overlooked, and stuck. You don't need to be louder. You don't need to be harsher. You don't need to prove more. You need to pause more, because power doesn't begin when you dominate others. It begins the moment you stop being dominated by your own reactions. And once you master that pause, everything else becomes possible. Chapter 2. Emotional control is the real competitive advantage. There is a quiet advantage that separates people who merely perform from people who last. It's not talent, it's not intelligence, and it's not how passionate you feel on a good day. It's emotional control. In a world where almost everyone is overstimulated, reactive, and emotionally exposed, the ability to stay regulated under pressure has become rare, and anything rare becomes valuable. Most people believe success comes from pushing harder, expressing more, or showing how much they care. But in reality, the people who rise are often the ones who remain steady when others become unstable. Because organizations don't depend on intensity, they depend on reliability. And reliability is impossible without emotional control. You can be skilled and still be a liability. You can be intelligent and still be exhausting to work with. You can be creative and still be unpredictable. When emotions dictate behavior, results become inconsistent, and inconsistency erodes trust. Trust is built when people know what to expect from you, not because you're boring, but because you're stable. Most people underestimate how closely their emotional patterns are being watched. Not consciously, but constantly. How you respond to stress, how you handle criticism, how you behave when things don't go your way. These moments quietly shape your reputation. People don't say it out loud, but they decide very quickly. Can I rely on this person when it matters? Will they stay composed under pressure? Will they make this situation heavier or lighter? And once that judgment is made, it's hard to reverse. And this is why emotional control is such a powerful advantage. It makes people feel safe around you. And safety creates opportunity. When someone remains calm, even when stakes are high, others begin to trust their judgment. They start assigning responsibility. They start offering access. They start keeping that person close. Not because they're the loudest voice in the room, but because they're the most grounded. Emotional control doesn't mean you don't feel stress. It means stress doesn't spill out of you. It doesn't leak into your tone. It doesn't infect your decisions. It doesn't spread to the people around you. Most people confuse emotional expression with authenticity. They think showing everything they feel makes them real. But emotional discipline is not dishonesty. It's leadership. Over yourself first. Then you can acknowledge emotions internally without broadcasting them externally. You can feel pressure without passing it on. You can be affected without being destabilized. This ability compounds over time. While others burn energy reacting, you conserve it. While others explain themselves, you remain focused. While others fluctuate, you stay consistent. Consistency builds a reputation faster than brilliance ever could. Because brilliance can be temporary, but steadiness signals long-term value. This is especially true under pressure. Pressure reveals emotional habits. Some people become sharp, defensive, or withdrawn. Others become erratic, anxious, or overly controlling. But the people who become indispensable are the ones who remain clear. They don't rush decisions to relieve discomfort. They don't speak just to release tension. They don't act just to feel in control. They slow down, and in doing so, they often make better choices while everyone else is rushing toward mistakes. This is why emotional control is not passive, it is active restraint. It's choosing not to say the first thing that comes to mind. It's choosing not to react to every stimulus. It's choosing not to let your internal state dictate your external behavior. These choices may feel small in the moment, but they shape how others experience you. And how others experience you determines whether you are replaceable or not. Because when pressure hits, people look for anchors. They look for someone who doesn't amplify chaos, someone who doesn't need emotional reassurance, someone who stays clear-headed when clarity matters most. That person becomes essential, not because they demand importance, but because they naturally take up that role. To build this kind of control, you must first stop outsourcing your emotional regulation. Many people unconsciously rely on external factors to feel okay. They need validation to stay confident. They need agreement to stay calm. They need praise to stay motivated. The problem is that anything you depend on can be taken away. And when it is, your emotional state collapses. Emotional control begins when you internalize stability, when your sense of balance no longer depends on how others behave, what they say, or how things unfold. This doesn't happen overnight. It's trained. Start by noticing patterns. When do you lose emotional clarity? Under criticism, when ignored, when challenged. These moments are not failures. They are training opportunities. Instead of reacting, practice staying present. Breathe slower than the moment demands. Speak calmer than the situation requires. Move deliberately when others rush. At first, this will feel unnatural. Your ego will push you to respond quickly, to assert yourself, to prove something, but with repetition, restraint becomes strength. You begin to realize something important. You don't need to win every moment to win long term. You don't need to respond to everything to remain respected. You don't need to display emotion to be understood. As your emotional control improves, something subtle changes. People stop testing you as much. They bring you problems instead of drama. They trust you with responsibility without you asking. Not because you tried to impress them, but because you made their world more stable. That is the real advantage. In environments where emotions run high and pressure is constant, the person who remains composed becomes a reference point. Others adjust to them, others take cues from them, others depend on them, and dependence is what makes you irreplaceable. Because skills can be taught, knowledge can be transferred, but emotional steadiness under pressure is earned. And once you have it, you carry an advantage that cannot be copied easily. Emotional control doesn't make you distant. It makes you dependable. It doesn't make you less human. It makes you more effective. And in a world where most people are emotionally exhausted, the one who remains calm becomes invaluable. That is why emotional control is not just personal growth. It is a competitive edge. Chapter 3. Discipline creates a version of you that can't be replaced. There is a reason so many capable people remain overlooked. It's not because they lack potential. It's because their value fluctuates. Some days they are sharp, focused, impressive. Other days they are distracted, inconsistent, unavailable. And in environments that demand reliability, inconsistency quietly disqualifies you. This is where discipline enters, not as punishment, but as protection. Discipline is what turns ability into identity. Anyone can perform well when they feel motivated. Anyone can show up strong when conditions are perfect. But the people who become irreplaceable are the ones who show up the same way, regardless of mood. They don't rely on inspiration, they rely on standards. And standards are built through discipline. Most people misunderstand discipline. They see it as restriction, pressure, or self-denial. In reality, discipline is what frees you from emotional randomness. Without discipline, your output depends on how you feel. With discipline, your output depends on who you are. That distinction changes everything, because feelings are unstable. Identity is not. When discipline is weak, talent leaks. You start strong, then fade. You impress early, then disappear. You promise more than you consistently deliver. Over time, people stop expecting much from you, not because you failed once, but because you failed to repeat success. And repetition is what creates trust. Trust doesn't come from intensity. It comes from consistency. Discipline is how consistency is built. It's the quiet agreement you make with yourself to act according to your values, siak, not your impulses. It's doing what needs to be done even when no one is watching, even when there is no reward, even when it feels uncomfortable. That is why discipline separates those who are admired from those who are relied upon. Admiration is optional. Reliance is earned. The world doesn't need more impressive people. It needs dependable ones. Discipline makes you dependable. When you operate with discipline, others begin to experience you as stable. They know how you will show up. They know your standards won't drop under pressure. They know you won't disappear when things get hard. This predictability is not boring. It's rare. In fact, in a world addicted to novelty, discipline feels almost intimidating. Because disciplined people don't negotiate with excuses. They don't drift. They don't need constant external motivation, as they move forward quietly, steadily, and relentlessly. This is why disciplined individuals are difficult to replace. Not because they are perfect, but because they are consistent. Most systems break because people break their own rules. They promise routines, then abandon them. They set goals, then compromise them. They decide standards, then lower them the moment it becomes inconvenient. Every time that happens, identity weakens. And when identity weakens, confidence becomes fragile. Discipline restores that confidence, not through positive thinking, but through proof. Every disciplined action tells your mind, I can trust myself. That self-trust compounds. You stop doubting your follow-through. You stop needing external validation. You stop over-explaining your intentions. You simply act. This quiet self-trust is felt by others. People can sense when someone is internally aligned, when words and actions match, when promises are kept without reminders. That alignment creates credibility, and credibility creates leverage. Discipline also does something else most people overlook. It protects your energy. Without discipline, energy is wasted on decision fatigue, emotional debates, and internal negotiation. Should I do this today? Maybe tomorrow. I'm not in the mood. With discipline, those conversations disappear. Decisions are made once. Standards are set. Action becomes automatic. This frees mental space, and mental space allows you to think clearly while others are overwhelmed. That clarity is another reason disciplined people rise. They are not distracted by internal chaos. They are not constantly recalibrating. They are not reacting to every emotional wave. They move with intention. Discipline doesn't mean rigidity. It means commitment. You can be flexible without being unstable. You can adapt without abandoning your core standards. The key is to decide what is non-negotiable. Not everything needs discipline, but some things must have it. Your routines, your work ethic, your response to pressure, your personal code. These are the areas where discipline creates an unshakable version of you. A version that doesn't disappear under stress. A version that doesn't collapse when motivation fades. A version that can be counted on. That version becomes your baseline. And once your baseline is strong, growth becomes inevitable. Because you are no longer building on emotion. You are building on structure. Most people chase motivation. Disciplined people build systems. Systems don't care how you feel. They carry you forward anyway. This is why discipline is the quiet engine behind long-term success. It doesn't draw attention. It doesn't create hype. But it produces results that last. Over time, people stop questioning your value. They stop checking if you'll follow through. They stop wondering if you're serious. They assume it, and assumption is power. When your discipline is visible through consistent action, you don't need to assert importance. Your reliability speaks for you. That's how discipline turns into identity. And identity is what makes you irreplaceable. Not because you are extraordinary in bursts, but because you are solid, steady, sound and present over time. In a world full of potential, the disciplined become permanent, and permanence is rare. That is why discipline doesn't just improve your life. It builds a version of you that cannot be replaced. Chapter 4. Control your ego, or It will cost you everything. Most people don't realize how much their ego is running their life. They think ego is confidence. They think ego is strength. They think ego is knowing your worth. But ego is something else entirely. Ego is the part of you that needs to be right. It's the part that reacts when it feels questioned. It's the part that turns feedback into offense and disagreement into threat. And if it's left unchecked, it quietly sabotages everything you're trying to build. Ego is not loud all the time. Sometimes it's subtle. It shows up as the urge to explain yourself when no explanation is needed. The need to defend decisions that don't require justification. The impulse to respond immediately so you don't look weak, wrong, or uncertain. These reactions feel protective, but they are not. They expose you. Because the more you react from ego, the more predictable you become. And predictability is leverage for everyone except you. Ego wants validation. Control wants results. Ego wants to win the moment. Control wants to win long term. That's the conflict most people never resolve. They sacrifice future value for immediate emotional relief. They speak to feel better, not to move things forward. They react to protect pride, not position. They argue to prove a point, not to improve an outcome. And over time, that pattern becomes expensive. It costs respect. It costs trust. It costs opportunities that never come because people quietly decide you're too reactive, too sensitive, or too difficult under pressure. The truth is uncomfortable but simple. The easier you are to offend, the easier you are to control. If someone can trigger you, they can steer you. If someone can provoke you, they can distract you. If someone can pull an emotional response from you on demand, they have power over you. That power doesn't come from strength. It comes from ego exposure. People with strong self-control don't need to win every interaction. They don't need to correct every misunderstanding. They don't need to announce their value. They let results speak. They understand something ego-driven people don't. Silence is not submission. It's strategy. Not everything requires your response. Not every comment deserves your energy. Not every challenge needs to be addressed publicly or immediately. When you respond selectively, your words gain weight. When you stop reacting to every stimulus, people stop testing you. This is how quiet authority is built. Ego-driven individuals feel compelled to prove themselves constantly. Controlled individuals feel no such need. They are comfortable being underestimated temporarily because they are confident in their long-term trajectory. Ego wants recognition now. Control is patient. That patience is powerful because patience allows you to observe instead of react. You begin to see patterns, motives, power dynamics. You notice who speaks from insecurity and who speaks from clarity. You notice who needs attention and who commands it without asking. And with that awareness, your responses become deliberate instead of emotional. One of the most effective ways to weaken the ego is to let go of the need to be understood. This is difficult. Your mind will resist it. You want people to see your intentions. You want them to know you're competent. You want them to recognize your effort. But chasing understanding often backfires. The more you explain, the more you signal insecurity. The more you defend, the more you invite scrutiny. The more you justify, the more you lower your position. People don't trust explanations. They trust consistency. If your actions are solid, misunderstanding doesn't harm you. If your results are clear, misinterpretation fades on its own. Ego doesn't like this because it feels uncomfortable. But discomfort is the cost of control. Another ego trap is the need to respond emotionally when challenged. Someone questions you. Someone doubts you. Someone pushes back. The ego interprets this as disrespect. But a challenge is not always an attack, and reacting as if it is only weakens your position. Controlled individuals respond differently. They listen first. They assess. They decide whether engagement is necessary. Sometimes the most powerful response is calm clarification. Sometimes it's a measured boundary. Sometimes it's no response at all. The key is that the choice is conscious. Ego reacts automatically. Control responds intentionally. Over time, this distinction becomes visible to others. They see who stays composed when tension rises. They see who doesn't crumble under pressure. They see who can take feedback without emotional collapse. Those people become trusted, not because they dominate, but because they are steady. Ego also drives comparison. It wants to measure, compete, and validate itself against others. This creates constant internal noise. Am I ahead? Am I respected? Am I falling behind? That noise drains focus. Control removes the need for comparison. When your standards are internal, you don't need external confirmation. When your direction is clear, you don't get pulled into side battles. When your ego is quiet, your energy stays where it belongs. On execution, on growth, on mastery. This is why ego control is essential if you want to become irreplaceable. People don't replace skill alone. They replace instability. They replace those who create friction, those who take things personally, those who make situations heavier instead of clearer. Ego adds weight to every interaction. Control removes it. When your ego is under control, you become easier to work with, easier to trust, and harder to replace. You don't demand attention. You don't create drama. You don't need reassurance. You simply deliver. And delivery builds reputation faster than self-promotion ever could. Controlling your ego doesn't mean shrinking yourself. It means refining yourself. It means choosing dignity over reaction, clarity over defensiveness, long-term respect over short-term emotional relief. The more you practice this, the more natural it becomes. You stop feeling the urge to respond instantly. You stop needing to correct everything. You stop taking things personally that were never about you. And in that space, something powerful emerges. Composure. Composure changes how people perceive you. They listen more carefully. They speak more thoughtfully. They treat you with greater respect. Not because you demanded it, but because your presence sets a tone. Ego wants control over others. True control begins with yourself. And once your ego is no longer in charge, you stop losing what matters most: your credibility, your influence, your long-term value. That is why mastering ego is not optional. It is the price of staying powerful without becoming reactive, and the foundation of becoming truly irreplaceable. Chapter 5. Why calm people are always the last ones standing. Pressure doesn't destroy people. It reveals them. When things are stable, almost everyone looks capable. When conditions are comfortable, performance is easy to fake. But when uncertainty rises, deadlines tighten and stakes increase, real differences appear. Some people speed up. They talk more. They rush decisions. They try to force outcomes. Others slow down. And almost without exception, the ones who remain calm are the ones still standing at the end. Calm is not passivity. It is capacity. It is the ability to stay functional when others become overwhelmed. It is the ability to think clearly while emotions are running high. It is the ability to act deliberately when urgency is trying to hijack your behavior. Most people mistake calm for a lack of concern. In reality, the calm is the result of internal control. When pressure hits, the nervous system reacts first. Heart rate rises, breathing shortens, muscles tense. For many people, that physical response immediately turns into mental chaos. Thoughts scatter. Focus narrows. Decision quality drops. This is where mistakes multiply. Calm people experience the same pressure. Their bodies feel the same signals, but they've trained themselves not to let those signals take over. They regulate first, then they respond. This ability is not talent, it's conditioning. Calm is built through repetition, by choosing to slow your breath when things feel urgent, by choosing to lower your voice when tension rises, by choosing to steady your posture when your mind wants to rush. These choices seem small, but they compound. Over time, your body learns that pressure does not require panic. Your mind learns that urgency does not demand speed. Your behavior becomes anchored instead of reactive. This is why calm people become anchors for others. In moments of uncertainty, people instinctively look for stability. They look for someone who doesn't amplify the problem, someone who doesn't make the situation heavier. That person becomes a reference point, not because they have all the answers, but because they don't collapse under the weight of the question. Calm people reduce friction. They don't add emotional noise. They don't escalate tension. They don't turn problems into performances. They focus on what matters next, and that focus creates momentum. In professional environments, this trait is priceless. Projects fail not because of a lack of skill, but because pressure breaks coordination. Communication deteriorates. Egos clash. Emotions override logic. The calm individual cuts through that. They clarify priorities. They stabilize conversations. They keep movement forward when others freeze or spin. Over time, people begin to associate their presence with relief. Things feel more manageable when they're around. Decisions feel clearer. Outcomes feel more controlled. That association is powerful, because when stakes rise, people remember who kept things together. Calm also protects judgment. Under pressure, the brain seeks fast relief. It wants to end discomfort, not optimize results. This leads to rushed decisions, defensive actions, and short-term thinking. Calm slows that process down. It creates enough space to ask better questions. What actually matters here? What can wait? What action moves us forward instead of just making us feel better? Those questions rarely get asked in panic. They require composure. This is why calm people make fewer irreversible mistakes. They don't commit emotionally to the first option. They don't lock themselves into positions too early. They don't escalate situations unnecessarily. They preserve flexibility, and flexibility under pressure is a form of strength. Calm also communicates confidence, not performative confidence, not loud confidence, but grounded confidence. When someone remains composed in difficult moments, others assume competence. They assume experience. They assume control. Even if those assumptions aren't always accurate, perception still shapes reality. People listen more closely to calm voices. They follow steady leadership more willingly. They trust measured actions more than frantic ones. This is why calm people often advance faster. Not because they are more ambitious, but because they are more trusted. Trust grows when others feel safe handing you responsibility, and safety comes from emotional stability. Calm does not mean you never feel stress. It means stress does not dictate your behavior. You still care, you still engage, you still act decisively, but you do so without urgency bleeding into your choices. This distinction matters. Urgency narrows perspective. Calm expands it. Urgency creates tunnel vision. Calm restores context. In complex situations, context is everything. Another reason calm people last longer is energy management. Panic is expensive. It drains mental energy. It exhausts emotional reserves. It shortens attention spans. People who live in a constant state of urgency burn out faster. Calm people conserve energy. They don't fight every battle. They don't react to every provocation. They don't carry unnecessary emotional weight. This allows them to sustain performance over longer periods, and endurance is often more valuable than intensity. The last ones standing are rarely the most explosive. They are the most durable. Durability comes from calm. It allows you to recover faster. It allows you to stay engaged longer. It allows you to adapt without breaking. Calm also improves how you are perceived during conflict. When disagreements arise, emotional intensity often determines outcomes more than logic. Those who raise their voices lose leverage, and those who become defensive lose credibility. Those who remain calm gain influence. Calm changes the dynamic. It slows the interaction. It forces others to match your pace. It shifts the tone from confrontation to resolution. Even when you disagree, your composure keeps doors open. People may not agree with you, but they respect how you carry yourself. And respect is a currency that compounds. Over time, calm becomes part of your identity. People begin to expect it from you. They trust you to handle pressure. They rely on you when situations become unstable. That reliance makes you difficult to replace. Not because you control everything, but because you don't lose control when it matters. Calm is not something you turn on in emergencies. It is something you practice daily. In how you respond to small frustrations. In how you handle minor setbacks. In how you speak when things don't go your way. Those moments are training. Each time you choose calm over reaction, you reinforce a pattern. Each time you slow down instead of speeding up, you strengthen control. Each time you stay composed, you raise your baseline. Eventually, calm becomes automatic. And when chaos arrives, you don't need to search for stability. You already are it. That is why calm people are always the last ones standing. Not because they avoid pressure, but because pressure doesn't own them. They move through it. And in a world that constantly pushes people to the edge, the one who remains centered becomes indispensable. Chapter 6. Stop chasing. Attention. Build quiet authority. Most people are chasing attention without realizing it. They speak more than necessary. They explain themselves repeatedly. They try to be seen, heard, noticed, validated. And the harder they chase attention, the less authority they have. Because authority doesn't come from being visible everywhere. It comes from being felt. Quiet authority is different from popularity. It doesn't rely on volume, charisma, or constant presence. It comes from consistency, restraint, and substance. People with quiet authority don't need to announce their importance. They don't signal power. They don't compete for the spotlight. Their presence speaks before they do. Most people confuse attention with influence. Attention is temporary. Influence is durable. Attention is loud. Influence is subtle. When you chase attention, you train people to evaluate you emotionally. When you build authority, you train people to rely on you functionally. This distinction determines whether you are replaceable or not. Attention-seeking behavior often comes from insecurity, not ambition. The need to be acknowledged, the need to be praised, the need to prove value in real time. But the more you seek recognition, the more you signal dependence on it, and dependence weakens position. Quiet authority grows from the opposite direction. It grows when your actions consistently reduce problems, when your presence adds clarity, when your words are rare but precise. People begin to associate you with outcomes instead of noise. That association is powerful, because when decisions matter, people look for those who deliver, not those who perform. Quiet authority is built through restraint. Restraint in speech, restraint in reaction, restraint in self-promotion. This doesn't mean staying silent all the time. It means speaking with intention. Every word has weight when words are not wasted. When someone who rarely speaks offers an opinion, people listen. When someone who doesn't rush gives direction, people follow. This is not manipulation. It's pattern recognition. People subconsciously assign value based on consistency. Those who talk constantly blur their signal. Those who speak selectively sharpen it. Quiet authority also requires comfort with invisibility. There will be moments when your contributions are overlooked, when others receive credit, when your work speaks quietly in the background. Ego resists this. Authority embraces it, because authority understands the long game. It knows that recognition delayed is often recognition earned. It knows that being underestimated temporarily is safer than being overrated prematurely. People with quiet authority don't panic when attention shifts away from them. They stay steady. That steadiness is noticed. Over time, others begin to see patterns. They see who remains consistent without applause. They see who delivers without constant reminders. They see who doesn't need external reinforcement to stay engaged. Those observations shape trust, and trust is the backbone of authority. Quiet authority also shows in how you handle disagreement. Attention-driven individuals need to win arguments publicly. They need to correct, interrupt, dominate conversations. Authority-driven individuals don't. They listen, they absorb, they choose their responses carefully. They don't argue to prove intelligence, they speak to move things forward. Sometimes that means disagreeing calmly. Sometimes it means letting an idea fail on its own. Sometimes it means saying nothing at all. This restraint makes others more cautious around you. Not fearful, respectful. People begin to consider their words before speaking. They think more carefully when engaging you. They approach you with intention instead of impulse. That shift changes dynamics. Quiet authority also changes how you are perceived in leadership roles. Leaders who demand attention exhaust people. Leaders who command calm earn loyalty. Calm leadership creates psychological safety. People think better around it. They perform better around it. This is why the most effective leaders are rarely the most dramatic. They are measured. They are composed. They are deliberate. They don't rush decisions to appear decisive. They don't speak to fill silence. They don't perform confidence. They embody it. Quiet authority is also built through boundaries. People who chase attention often overextend. They say yes too often. They respond too quickly. They make themselves constantly available. This erodes value. Scarcity creates importance. Boundaries create respect. When you don't respond immediately, your response gains weight. When you don't accept everything, your acceptance matters. When you don't explain everything, your explanations feel intentional. This doesn't mean playing games. It means valuing your energy. Energy directed selectively becomes influence. Quiet authority also comes from internal validation. When you stop needing approval, your behavior changes. You no longer speak to be liked. You no longer act to be noticed. You no longer shape yourself around reactions. You act from standards. Those standards become visible through consistency. People trust those who trust themselves, not loudly, not arrogantly, quietly. This self-trust allows you to remain composed under pressure. You don't chase reassurance. You don't panic when challenged. You don't collapse when ignored. You stay grounded. That grounding makes you reliable. And reliability is what people seek when things matter. Over time, quiet authority becomes part of your reputation. People describe you differently. He's steady. She's solid. They always deliver. Those descriptions are powerful. They open doors without you knocking. They create opportunities without you asking. They make you difficult to replace. Because while attention can be redirected, trust cannot. Quiet authority also protects you from burnout. Attention-seeking is exhausting. It requires constant output, constant performance, constant engagement. Authority is sustainable. It allows you to operate at your pace, to conserve energy, to choose your moments. This longevity matters. Those who burn bright often burn out. Those who build quietly last longer. In the long run, endurance beats intensity. Quiet authority does not mean hiding. It means letting substance lead. When you stop chasing attention, attention finds you naturally, not because you demanded it, but because your presence earned it. People begin to seek your input. They ask for your perspective. They involve you in decisions, not because you inserted yourself, but because your absence would be noticed. That is the ultimate signal of authority, being missed when you're not there. Quiet authority is not built overnight. It's built through repeated restraint, through consistent delivery, through emotional control and disciplined action. But once established, it becomes self-reinforcing. You no longer need to prove value. Your behavior already has. In a world full of noise, the one who moves calmly stands out, not by volume, but by gravity. And gravity is what pulls opportunity toward you. That is why the path to becoming irreplaceable is not louder. It is quiet. Chapter 7. Self-control turns you into the person. others depend on. Dependability is one of the most underestimated forms of power. It doesn't look impressive at first glance. It doesn't create applause. It doesn't demand attention. But it quietly decides who stays relevant and who fades out. When things are easy, almost everyone seems capable. When pressure appears, true dependability becomes rare, and self-control is what creates it. People depend on those who remain steady, those who don't overreact, those who don't disappear when things become uncomfortable. Self-control is what allows you to show up consistently, regardless of mood, stress, or circumstance. Without it, reliability collapses. You may intend to follow through, but emotion interferes. You may plan to stay composed, but pressure takes over. You may want to be supportive, but irritation leaks out. Over time, these small failures add up. People stop leaning on you, not out of malice, but out of experience. They learn that you are unpredictable. Dependability, once lost, is difficult to regain. This is why self-control matters more than talent in long-term relationships and environments. Talent attracts attention. Self-control earns trust. Trust is built when others feel safe relying on you. Safe emotionally, safe mentally, safe practically. They know you won't escalate tension. They know you won't complicate problems. They know you won't create chaos when clarity is needed. This kind of trust is rare, and rarity creates value. People with strong self-control don't need to assert reliability. They demonstrate it through behavior. They keep their word, even when it's inconvenient. So they remain calm, even when others panic. They respond thoughtfully, even when emotions run high. These behaviors create a pattern, and patterns create reputation. Over time, others begin to associate your presence with stability. When something needs to be handled carefully, they think of you. When a situation is sensitive, they involve you. When something cannot fall apart, they rely on you. Not because you asked, but because you proved yourself. Self-control also determines how much responsibility you are given. Responsibility is rarely assigned based on ambition alone. It's assigned based on perceived risk. People ask themselves, will this person stay composed? Will they act responsibly under pressure? Will they manage complexity without losing control? Those questions are answered long before opportunities arise, and they are answered in small moments. How you handle disagreement, how you respond to frustration, how you manage stress. Self-control in these moments builds a quiet resume. Others may not comment on it, but they notice. And when opportunity appears, they choose the person who feels safest. That person becomes indispensable. Self-control also allows you to support others without being drained by them. Many people avoid responsibility because they are overwhelmed by other people's emotions. They absorb stress, they internalize chaos, they lose focus. This makes them unreliable. People with self-control create boundaries internally. They can be present without being consumed. They can listen without carrying everything. They can engage without losing balance. This makes them strong under pressure. Others feel it. They don't feel judged. They don't feel rushed. They don't feel dismissed. They feel supported. Support builds loyalty, and loyalty reinforces dependability. Self-control also stabilizes decision-making. When emotions are unregulated, decisions become reactive. They are made to reduce discomfort, not to create progress. This leads to inconsistency. Self-controlled individuals make decisions from principles, not impulses. They consider consequences. They think long-term. They act deliberately. This consistency builds confidence, not just in themselves, but in others. People trust those whose decisions don't swing wildly with mood. This trust deepens relationships. In teams, families, and organizations, dependability becomes the backbone of success. Plans work because people follow through. Momentum builds because actions are consistent. Progress happens because chaos is managed. The person with self-control becomes a stabilizing force. They don't need to control others. They control themselves. And that self-control creates influence. Influence rooted in trust is powerful. It doesn't require persuasion. It doesn't require authority. It doesn't require force. People cooperate willingly. They respect boundaries. They value input. They listen because they know you won't misuse their trust. Self-control also allows you to take on more without breaking. People who react emotionally burn out faster. They carry stress home. They dwell on conflict. They replay conversations endlessly. This drains energy. Self-controlled individuals process stress efficiently. They acknowledge it. They learn from it. They release it. This allows them to remain available over time. Availability is another form of dependability. Being present consistently, not just in bursts. Over time, this consistency compounds. Others begin to assume your reliability. They stop double-checking. They stop micromanaging. They stop worrying. Assumption of reliability is a sign of trust, and trust is the foundation of being irreplaceable. People rarely replace those they trust deeply. Even when skills can be taught, even when alternatives exist, because replacing dependability feels risky. Self-control also shapes how you handle mistakes. Everyone makes them, but self-controlled individuals don't collapse under error. They take responsibility calmly. They correct without defensiveness. They move forward without emotional drama. This response preserves trust. People know mistakes won't spiral. That knowledge is reassuring, and reassurance creates confidence in your leadership, whether formal or informal. Over time, your self-control becomes a signal that you are safe to rely on, safe to involve, safe to trust with what matters. This signal cannot be faked. It is built through repeated behavior, through calm responses, through consistent follow-through, through emotional discipline. That is how self-control turns into dependability, and dependability turns into irreplaceable value. Not because you demanded importance, but because you became necessary. In a world full of talent and noise, the person others depend on quietly rises. Because when everything is uncertain, the one who remains steady becomes essential. And that steadiness is built moment by moment through self-control. Chapter 8. Master yourself and you'll never need to compete. Competition dominates how most people think about success. They measure themselves against others. They track who is ahead, who is falling behind. They feel pressure to prove, outperform, and stay visible. This constant comparison creates tension. It sharpens insecurity. It fuels anxiety. It keeps attention outward instead of inward. But there is a quieter path, one that removes the need to compete entirely. That path is self-mastery. When you master yourself, competition loses its grip on you. Not because you stop caring about growth, but because your reference point changes. You stop measuring progress against others. You start measuring it against your own standards. This shift is subtle, but powerful. Most competition is driven by uncertainty. People compete when they are unsure of their value. They compare when they lack internal benchmarks. They chase validation when self-trust is weak. Self-mastery resolves this uncertainty. When you know your standards, you no longer need comparison. When you trust your process, you don't rush to prove anything. When you are grounded in discipline and control, external noise fades. You become internally anchored. That anchor changes how you move through the world. You no longer react to others' success as a threat. You no longer feel diminished by someone else's progress. You no longer chase recognition to confirm your worth. Instead, you focus on refinement. Refinement of your habits. Refinement of your reactions. Refinement of your thinking. This inward focus compounds faster than outward comparison ever could. Because competition divides attention, mastery concentrates it. People who compete externally are constantly distracted. They watch others instead of building themselves. They adjust direction based on trends instead of principles. They burn energy, worrying about position instead of progress. Self-mastered individuals move differently. They commit to their path. They raise their standards quietly. They let time do the talking. This creates a different kind of confidence. Not confidence based on being better than someone else, but confidence rooted in self-alignment. You know who you are. You know how you operate. You know what you tolerate and what you don't. That clarity removes urgency. Urgency is what drives competition. The fear of missing out. The fear of being left behind. The fear of not being enough. Self-mastery dissolves those fears, not by denying them, but by replacing them with discipline and control. When you are disciplined, progress is inevitable. When you are controlled, setbacks don't derail you. When you are consistent, growth becomes predictable. Predictable growth removes panic, and without panic, competition loses its emotional charge. Another reason self-mastery eliminates competition is that it makes you unique, not in a performative way, in a functional one. Most people share similar emotional patterns. They react the same way to stress. They collapse under similar pressures. They repeat the same mistakes. When you master your reactions, your discipline, your ego, and your emotional control, you step outside that pattern. You operate differently. That difference is not cosmetic. It's structural. And structural differences are hard to replicate. Others can copy skills. They can mimic strategies. They can imitate surface behavior, but they cannot easily copy internal control. This is why self-mastery makes you irreplaceable. You are no longer competing on features. You are competing on stability. And stability is rare. Self-mastery also changes how others perceive you. When you are not competing, people stop positioning against you. They don't feel threatened. They don't feel challenged. They don't feel the need to outdo you. Instead, they collaborate. They consult. They rely. This shift opens doors that competition closes. People trust those who are not driven by insecurity. They respect those who are not desperate to win. They follow those who are calm in their confidence. That calm confidence comes from mastery. So self-mastery also protects you from burnout. Competition demands constant comparison. Constant comparison drains energy. You're always scanning, always evaluating, always adjusting. Self-mastery simplifies. You know what you need to do today. You know what standards you're maintaining. You know what matters and what doesn't. This simplicity preserves focus. Focus fuels momentum. Momentum compounds quietly. Over time, you look back and realize something important. You didn't outrun others. You outlasted them. While others chased external wins, you built internal strength. While others fluctuated, you stayed consistent. While others burned bright and faded, you moved steadily forward. This is how mastery wins without competing. It also reframes success. Success stops being about recognition. It becomes about alignment. Are your actions aligned with your values? Are your habits aligned with your goals? Are your reactions aligned with your long-term vision? When alignment is strong, confidence follows naturally. You don't need applause to feel solid. You don't need comparison to feel capable. You don't need to rush to feel relevant. You simply continue. Self-mastery also allows you to handle success gracefully. When others succeed, you don't feel threatened. You feel informed. You observe. You learn. You refine. This keeps your ego quiet and your growth steady. Competition often distorts perception. It makes others' success feel personal. Mastery removes that distortion. It allows you to see clearly. And clarity is power. Eventually, something unexpected happens. People stop seeing you as a competitor. They see you as a constant. Someone who is always there, always steady, always improving. That perception is powerful. It shifts how opportunities come to you. You are invited, not because you demanded a seat, but because your presence is valued. That value is built through mastery, not competition. Mastering yourself doesn't mean withdrawing from ambition. It means refining it. Ambition becomes focused, directed, sustainable. You still aim high, but you do so without anxiety. You still grow, but you do so without comparison. You still succeed, but you do so without chasing. This is the final layer of control. Not control over others, not control over outcomes. Control over yourself. When you reach this point, competition becomes irrelevant, because you are no longer playing the same game. So you are building something deeper, something stable, something that lasts. And in a world obsessed with winning, the person who masters themselves quietly becomes the one everyone else measures against, without ever needing to compete. Control is the quiet advantage that changes everything. Control was never about force, it was never about dominance, and it was never about proving anything to anyone. True control has always been internal. Throughout this audiobook, one truth has repeated itself in different forms. The people who last, who rise, who become irreplaceable are not the most emotional, the loudest, or the most reactive. They are the most regulated. They control their reactions when others lose theirs. They maintain discipline when motivation fades. They keep their ego quiet when pressure tries to provoke them. They remain calm when chaos pulls everyone else apart. They build authority without chasing attention. They become dependable without demanding importance. They master themselves instead of competing with others, and because of that, they stand apart without trying. Control is not something you turn on in critical moments. It is something you practice daily, quietly, repeatedly. In how you pause before responding, in how you show up when no one is watching, in how you hold your standards when it would be easier to lower them, in how you choose composure over reaction, restraint over impulse, clarity over noise. These small choices shape who you become. Over time, they shape how others experience you. People begin to feel safer around you. They trust you more. They rely on you when things matter. They notice your absence when you're not there. That is what it means to be irreplaceable. Not admired from afar, not praised loudly, but needed. And the most powerful part is this. You don't need permission to build this version of yourself. You don't need approval. You don't need validation. You don't need perfect conditions. You need consistency. The world will always be unpredictable. People will always test boundaries. Pressure will always exist. But when you control yourself, none of that owns you. You stop being pulled in every direction. You stop leaking energy into reactions that don't serve you. You stop competing for attention and start commanding respect through presence. Control becomes your baseline. Calm becomes your signature. Discipline becomes your identity. And once that identity is established, your value no longer fluctuates. You don't rise and fall with emotion. You don't disappear under stress. You don't need to announce your worth. It's felt. If you take one thing from this audiobook, let it be this. Every moment you choose control over reaction, you're investing in a future version of yourself that cannot be easily replaced. That future is built quietly, patiently, relentlessly, and it starts the next time life pushes you and you choose to stay grounded. Thank you for listening.